Left humiliated at the altar, the bride wept alone as guests whispered and left, until a stranger walked up, sat beside her, and whispered 6 words that changed everything. "You're not meant to break today." The music stopped before it ever really began. Sophie Miller, 27, stood frozen at the altar, bouquet trembling in her hands. Her smile had faded 20 minutes ago, when the priest glanced at the back doors, then quietly told her, "He's not coming." Her fiancé, Evan, had disappeared. No call, no note, just silence. And now the chapel, once packed with family and laughter, was filled with whispers, shifting feet, and stares that made her skin burn. Guests slowly began leaving. Someone muttered, "Poor thing." Someone else sighed, "I knew he wasn't ready." But Sophie? She didn't move. Still in her white dress, still gripping the flowers that now felt like a mockery. She sat alone on the front pew, mascara streaking her cheeks, as the room emptied around her. Then, a soft voice broke the silence. "You're not meant to break today." Sophie looked up through tears. A man stood there, not dressed like the guests. No tie, just a soft gray sweater, dark jeans, and eyes that looked like they'd seen storms too. "Excuse me?" she asked, voice cracking. He gently sat down beside her, 2 rows back, giving her space. "You don't know me," he said, "but I know what it looks like when someone tries to shatter you." "But broken isn't your story. Not today, not ever." Sophie stared at him. Who was he? Why did he care? But something about his presence calmed her. He wasn't there to pity her. He wasn't offering a cliché or a fix. He was just there. And somehow, his words felt more real than the empty vows she almost recited. She turned to him slowly. "Do you believe in second chances?" He nodded. "Only because I've lived one." What Sophie didn't know was that this stranger's own life was once left in pieces, and that today she wasn't just meeting kindness. She was meeting her beginning. They sat in the empty chapel for a long time, silence stretching gently between them. Sophie finally spoke, her voice low and uneven. "I should feel angry, but all I feel is small, like I wasn't enough." The man looked at her carefully. "It's not your size he couldn't handle, Sophie. It's your strength." She blinked. "How do you know my name?" He smiled softly. "They announced it before the ceremony started. I wasn't here as a guest, just wandered in. I like quiet places with music." A pause. "Didn't expect to walk into this." She let out a dry laugh, the first laugh since the morning. "You didn't expect to witness a live heartbreak?" "No," he said, "but I've stood in your shoes, abandoned, dressed up for someone who never showed." Sophie turned fully to face him, curious despite herself. "You were left too?" 2 years ago, different setting, same silence." He took a breath. "I had a fiancée who said she loved my calm, but the moment life got chaotic, she said I felt like a burden instead of a partner. She left a note, on the table, the day before the wedding. Said she didn't want a husband who was too quiet to fight." Sophie frowned. "What did you do?" He smiled faintly. "I learned to stop needing noise to feel seen." The doors creaked as janitors began tidying up. Sophie looked around at the petals still scattered on the floor. "Do you think there's a version of this story where I'm not humiliated?" The man leaned forward. "There's a version where this is the chapter that makes the ending worth reading. Because this is not the day your life ends. It's the day you finally get to write it for you." Sophie inhaled sharply. For the first time all day, her chest didn't feel heavy. As she stood up to leave, still in her wedding dress, he stood with her. Walk with me? He asked. She nodded. And together, they walked out of the chapel into the golden hour light. Not lovers, not yet friends, just two broken pieces that somehow felt less alone together. But the world outside wasn't ready for what would come next. Because their story wasn't done. It was only just beginning. They walked through the empty church parking lot, her heels in one hand, his quiet presence steady beside her. Sophie's white dress fluttered slightly in the breeze, streaked with a little dirt, a lot of emotion, and pieces of a day that didn't go as planned. I never even saw it coming, she said softly. He texted me good morning like everything was fine, and now... She trailed off. The man, Caleb, didn't rush her silence. Closure doesn't come from their words, he said. It comes from choosing not to carry their silence anymore. At the corner coffee shop, they sat in a booth, her veil now folded beside the napkins, his hands wrapped around a warm mug. They talked about the pressure of perfection, about how weddings became performances, about how people sometimes vanished rather than admit they were never built for commitment. You think I'll ever trust someone again? She asked, eyes heavy. Caleb didn't sugarcoat. Not easily, but trust isn't a switch, it's a garden. You water it a little, step back. Then one day something green starts to grow again. Days passed, then weeks. Sophie didn't expect to hear from Caleb again, but he texted. Hey, I found a bookstore that smells like old paper and healing. Want to check it out? She went. They never called them dates, just days. But every day something grew. People whispered, of course. She moved on fast. Wasn't she left at the altar? But Sophie had stopped listening to people who only saw the headline, never the healing. 3 months after the wedding, that wasn't, Sophie stood at an art exhibit, her cheeks flushed with pride. She'd finally opened her photography show. Unfinished vows, portraits of people who chose themselves after heartbreak. Caleb had helped hang every photo. She saw him across the room now, talking to a gallery guest. And for a second, her heart skipped, not in panic, but peace. Her story didn't end at the altar. It was just rerouted toward someone who didn't promise a perfect day, but who showed up again and again, even when the music stopped. 1 year later, Sophie stood in front of a mirror. Not in a white gown. This time, she wore a flowing midnight blue dress, elegant, effortless, entirely her. The kind of dress you wear when you're not proving anything to anyone. Behind her, Caleb adjusted his tie awkwardly. Still hate formal wear, he murmured. She laughed. You look fine, slightly uncomfortable but very handsome. They weren't preparing for a wedding. They were heading to her second gallery opening, now sold out weeks in advance. The theme, what remains after breaking. As the evening unfolded, guests moved through portraits of hands letting go, women staring into mirrors, men walking into foggy mornings, images of grief and grit and growth. At the final frame was a photo Sophie had never shared publicly. A single pew in an empty chapel, a bouquet abandoned on the seat, and light streaming through the stained glass window. Beneath it, the caption read, "The day he left was the day I came home to myself." Later that night, on the rooftop of the gallery, Sophie looked out over the city lights. Caleb came up beside her, holding a glass of sparkling cider. You ever wonder what would have happened if he hadn't left? He asked. She paused. Sometimes, but not with regret. I think I would have lived someone else's idea of love. Now I'm living mine. He nodded, quiet. You still cry sometimes? Only when I forget how far I've come. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I wrote something, back then, the day I met you. She She opened it. Inside, 6 simple words. "You're not meant to break today." The same words he'd whispered to her in the chapel. Tears stung her eyes, but not from sadness, from gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing up when no one else did." He leaned closer. "You didn't need saving. You just needed someone who saw the whole picture." Today, Sophie's studio walls are lined with photos of strength born from silence, beauty born from bruises. But tucked in a frame behind her desk, barely visible to visitors, is a candid snapshot. A tear-streaked bride sitting alone, and a man in a gray sweater kneeling beside her, saying nothing but everything. The note beneath it simply says, "Some beginnings arrive dressed like endings." Because Sophie Miller wasn't rejected that day. She was rerouted toward a love deeper than ceremony. The kind that whispers when the world turns its back. You were never meant to break.